This week in the conversation, writers Liddell and Sara Bushway joined me for a very interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about what it takes to be relevant in this ever-saturated literary space. Liddell is a prolific writer. She's a multi-genre author. She's published many interesting books, critically acclaimed author. She, in the past, also was my guest several times in the conversation. Sara Bushway, also, she's an impeccable writer. Remember, she's written, I had her in the conversation and we were talking about her interesting debut novel titled Honey Beaumont. Speaking on that note, Honey Beaumont also has been republished, this time in a hardback format. Interesting. But before we get into this video, I just want to remind everyone that it's important to subscribe to this YouTube channel. The best way to support the conversation is to subscribe to it. Tell your friends, everyone you know, and family members. It's important to do so. The best literary show out there on YouTube. So if you subscribed to the conversation, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it's going to you directly on your portal. So let's get started. And my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening with two impeccable writers. I'm here with Liddell, also known as Lauren Masterson, and also with Sara Bushway, two good friends, and who in the past were my guests in the conversation. But this afternoon, it's going to be something very different. We're going to be talking about how a writer can be relevant in this ever-growing, saturated space, out there in the book industry. But before we do so, I know, Sara, since the last time we talked about Honey Beaumont, you promised me that Honey 2 was going to be, some in the corner. Okay, so I have been waiting. You know what you've been doing? Putting me on the hook to wait for Honey 2. Now, I understand that Honey 2 is about to be out there for all the world to see. So, Sara, welcome to the conversation again.
Thank you. That's actually second edition of Honey 1.
Honey 1? Okay.
That's what that is. And we're finally releasing it in hardback, which makes me so happy. I love the new art.
Right.
I'm over the moon about the new cover image. It's just beautiful. But yeah, it's second edition of the first book because, you find things that you'd like to improve about it. I've got some 5-star ratings on Amazon, which are emblazoned on the front.
Great.
I am working on Honey 2, though, I promise.
Okay.
Someday.
But that's okay because your writing is so beautiful. So anything you put out there, I believe you're a fan, and I'm one of them. So we'll ultimately pick it up. So I can't wait to lay my hand on it. But at least my good friend, last time also we talked. By the way, Liddell is the author of several books. Among them, one I really love is Geisha Hands. I wolfed down the book when I was reading it, quite frankly. She's also the author of Geisha. She has several books, but Geisha Hand, let me just get them right. Love of the Sea, Tearing Down the Wall. And of course, so many of them, a collection or several collection of poetry. Liddell doesn't sleep. She writes and writes and writes. So again, Alice, I'm so happy to have you back in the conversation. Welcome.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So where are we in the project now? I know you were working on a historical fiction.
Yeah, I have my fingers in several projects, as I always do, because that's how I roll. So my most recent release is my novella, Pandora. It is a Regency era fantasy about a water nymph. Really cute, really fun story. And I have been doing second edition releases of my romance novels with brand new covers. So really awesome with that. And I'm currently querying, trying to woo a literary agent with my French Revolution dark vampire book, Succumb to Darkness. And I'm also currently working on writing my next romance novel, Be Mine, as well as my next historical fiction novel, Marie Antoinette, and the first book of my 12-book young adult fantasy series that will also be fully illustrated. So got a lot going on, but that's how I do it.
So I wasn't lying when I said that. She just doesn't stop.
That's pretty normal. I don't think I know an author who works on one book at a time. I don't believe I do. I'm working on 4. So
She's just a workaholic too. What I really like about writers is we're so fascinated about writing. And also last week, one of the others told me sometimes she hears the characters.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing, Sarah? Honey would say, you know what? It's time for me to be out right now.
A little bit. Every now and then I'll be playing around on my phone, playing Words with Friends or something. And I swear I feel Honey kick my chair and go, get that next book done. What's wrong with you?
Okay, so my question, Sarah. So why is a hero harder than Honey? Why is a hero harder than Honey himself? Honey is supposed to be the protagonist and the hero.
He's a cinnamon roll style character, which means he's been through a lot of really tough stuff, but he's still very positive in his mannerisms, and he's still very receptive to new things instead of becoming like a hardened criminal or someone who's like like what you might consider like an anti-hero. He's kind of the opposite of that. And so for him, it's like, being a hero is really hard because a lot of people attribute heroism to things like Batman, who's been through a trauma, or like someone who's had to overcome something. And in truth, of his life, all the way up until that point where he discovered the rest of the world outside of where he was working in the brothel, he had never experienced anything like that. So he was new to being a hero. And so for him, it was hard. It was very hard to learn what that life was going to be like, and even more so to accept it.
Okay. Now I understand that there is an official date for the publication of Honey 2. I mean, not Honey 2, but the sequel of Honey 1.
No, actually the second book, because it's still in its infancy, I'm still in draft 1, which means it still needs a lot of work. Rough drafts are always looking terrible. I just got to tell you that. But I would love to get it out by the end of next year because I have so much going on. I'm working on my master's in clinical psychology. I work for the state that I live in. So I have a lot going on. So there's a good chance that he's not going to see the light of day for a while yet.
Okay. So actually, we're still promoting Honey 1.
Yeah, we're still enjoying Honey 1, but I do love the revamp, the new cover and everything. And it's always good to, sort of branch out. So we're sort of changing some things up in it. We found some typos. There was an editing error, was a thing. So I'm glad to see the book evolving into what eventually might be its final form, to where it's perfect, because the first time's never perfect. The rough draft obviously is never perfect. The 38th draft is not perfect. But it's nice.
My question now for Alice, because I know that when it comes to writing, perfection has always been said is a relative term. Now, Alice, when does another say, well, this is it. This is the final call, and I have to give the final call. Let it go out. Let it be out there. So when do you feel, Alice, it's time to do so?
So definitely, it is a hard line to draw, because you can write a story forever. You can sit and edit a story forever. My books go through anywhere from about 3 to 6 rounds of editing before I send them on their way. So, you know, already my process is very meticulous. It takes a very long time. But at a certain point, you just have to look at it and go, you know what, it's good enough. Because of, you know, you have to find that point where you just have to stop yourself. Otherwise, you're going to edit yourself into oblivion. You're just going to keep coming up with new stuff, you know, and you just have to, at a certain point, just decide, you know what, it's good enough. It's a book. We'll, you know, set it out into the world and worry about the next project. And for me, how I've been able to determine that is by having this very clinical process, in that once I get from, you know, beginning to end with the rough draft, where it's, you know, all the way from chapter 1 to literally typing the end on the bottom, and then doing my editing rounds, I limit myself to, if I get to round 6 of editing, I'm like, there is no round 7, not allowed. After round 6, you're done. You'll be done. It's a book.
Yeah. I've heard of people doing that.
Yeah.
Well, it's true though, because if you keep editing, it feels like every time you edit, you're trying to make it what you think is better, which is based on what you read, and you're editing yourself out of your book. So it's almost dangerous to keep editing, in my opinion.
That's true. That's true. Sarah, let me ask you something real quick on this one. I know, Sarah, sometimes it can be very, very difficult to simultaneously promote a literary work and also trying to be relevant in this very, very tough, you know, crowded space, you know. So how do you really do that? Because to fine tune your literary skills, it requires time, but also to be relevant, you know, requires time. So how do you manage it? How do you do that? Can you teach the audience a little bit of how you do that?
Irrelevant. Well, what I've found is knowing your audience is a big deal, which is why I'm not like on Twitter all day, every day, but I do hop on Twitter every day, and I do read stuff from people that I follow, people who follow me. And it's important to know what's happening in the world as well, just a little bit, because you know, whenever certain things are going on in the world, you don't want to use certain emojis, you don't want to use certain buzzwords, because you're going to get a negative reaction. Without mentioning anything in specific, but I believe one of the big things to do is to be out in the world. Don't just copy and paste your same promo things over and over, because what sells a book today might not sell a book in 6 months, and people go, you just copy and paste that every day. I'm tired of looking at it. But whenever you connect with your readers, your potential readers even, you can kind of see what draws their attention, you know, what they're interested in. And it's also important not to hashtag people to death, because in Twitter, if you hashtag too much, it kills your vibe.
Okay, that's a good lesson though. Do you think it's the same thing for you too, Alice?
So with my approach, I'm very lucky in that I also work as a social media manager, so I'm very plugged into that. And, you know, I'm sitting here studying algorithms, studying trending hashtags. Like actually earlier today, before we got on this panel, I've been participating in the pitch party today, which is Flip It. And just, you know, being aware of all those sort of events, all those sort of community opportunities and all of that, and just really being able to insert myself into the internet as a whole really helps me to stay relevant and to be able to advertise my books.
Okay. You know, one of the things sometimes I don't usually share with my writers in the YouTube channel, I am able to look at the statistic, you know, to the analytics. One thing I realized, sometimes videos you think that would never get any attention whatsoever, and they turn out to be the ones, you know. I don't understand, because you just mentioned the algorithms, because I really don't understand. For example, last week I had a gentleman, we had a very interesting conversation, his book is a historical fiction thriller. Very nice conversation, but nothing out of the ordinary, different from the ones I've been having. Could you believe it? So right now, since Friday, almost at 30,000 views. And when I look at the statistic, 19,000 people just come from recommendations.
Wow.
19,000. And then 11,000 would be, I think, was up next. When you break it down, I just don't understand. I'm just blown away. So Alice, could you please tell us a little bit how these things can simply just, you'll never know what's going to blow up. You don't know. So how? What's the secret?
So there are two halves to that equation, is that there is the half of the unpredictable, that you can't always predict, why or how or when something will blow up. There are some things that just take off for no particular reason, and there's no way to strategize or algorithm that into happening. Whereas there are ways that you can create the circumstances to help manufacture that. And a big part of that, like I said, is knowing the trending hashtags, knowing how to optimize your search. That's also called SEO, search engine optimization. And that's just knowing how to write out descriptions, how to put it together so that you're using all of the right keywords that people are going to search, and also subject matter. Things come and go. Things are popular one day and not popular the next. And if you just hit that right, where it's like right now, thrillers are trending. And so that's why, this particular video blew up, or, romance is trending. So now this romance video blew up, or, whatever. You have to catch that wave, but you also have to set yourself up to be able to catch that wave in the first place. So it's this little dance of the things you can control versus the things that are just the randomness and chaos of the universe.
And I have to say the same thing also with Sara Bushway. The first, when we had that conversation last time, I think the first few days, the video has gotten about 2,000 views. And then one morning, all of a sudden, I see another 2,000 people watch this thing. So I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. So I look at this, I analyze it. But ever since then, people keep coming. Not at this huge number, but people still coming and watching. So I really don't know. I don't know.
There's a lot. The big thing is to make sure that whenever you're reaching your audience, that you are being kind of fun and definitely polite, because I've made promotional posts that I thought, oh, well, this is really cool looking, and it got almost no interaction. But then on Twitter, I shared just a link to my book, a simple image of the cover, and all I said was, can you guys please retweet? No hashtags, no nothing. It blew up. It got like 47 retweets, and everybody talking about it. And I mean, my interaction just shot up. It was bizarre. And I was like, all I did was ask politely. I might have had a smiley face, but I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's about timing. And I do believe it's a lot about content, because people want to think that, oh, well, this person's being friendly. So, I think I'll share that, rather than sharing negativity.
That's true. And I remember we talked about the timing also in our last conversation. And I believe you said, if I can remember, around 9 a.m. or your tweet would get more attention, or early afternoon around 1. So, Alice, what is so magic about these two times?
So basically, the magic times for getting seen on any corner of social media are 9 a.m. and then noon for lunch, and then 1 to 2 o'clock. Those are like the big prime times for posting anything. And that's because that's usually when people are most likely to be checking their phone and checking their social media. Is 9 a.m. they just got into work and they're getting settled in and they just want a minute to breathe. And then at noon, obviously, everybody's on their lunch break. And then there are also people that take late lunches. So they might not necessarily have their lunch break at noon, but maybe they have it at 1 o'clock or at 2. So that's why there are those times. Whereas if you try to post at like 7 a.m., nobody's going to see it because they're either just waking up or they're getting ready for work or they're still asleep. And then nobody's going to look at it at like 5 o'clock because everybody's going home from work, commuting, going to and from. They're not looking at their phones, they're busy driving in the car or doing their thing or at the grocery store or whatever. So it's thinking about human behavior, thinking about, okay, it's this time o'clock. What are people typically doing right now?
Is it the same thing, Sarah?
Okay, it depends on what I'm posting. So if I'm on Twitter and I want interaction for my book, she's got it. It's 9, noon, 1 to 2, and occasionally I'll pick up one like right around 6 or 7 in the evening. I'll find a big spike. But like if I'm reaching out to the gaming community, because I'm also an avid video gamer, a console player,
totally different time. Yeah.
but whenever I want to talk to them,
Right.
I realize most gamers are night owls, which means they're not rolling out of bed until about 10:30. So if I want to talk to those peeps, I really want to wait until 10:30, 11 o'clock. Because they're usually up a little later. Some of them are streamers, and that's when they stream is like 2 a.m. That's when they set up their videos. So for me, it's just about knowing who you're reaching out to as well.
Now let's talk about genres. I remember last time we talked, Sarah, you said between fantasy, you might consider, transition to another literary genre. And I remember we talked about memoir. So do you still have that in mind? And why?
Memoirs, I'm putting that off because I really enjoy playing around in fiction much more. It's much more fun. I am sliding into sci-fi a little bit more with some of my newer projects. So I'm kind of transitioning from dystopian fantasy into sci-fi fantasy. Someday I may take on high fantasy, but it's not really where I live in my brain. So I like to have things that are a little more complex than that. So I slide around a little bit, but I did at one point have a horror novel that I was working on. I shelved it because ultimately I decided it was very terrible and that it needed a complete rewrite. And I just haven't come back to it yet.
That's what we are as writers. We're perfectionists.
Never throw it out. You just set it to the side.
But at least I know you're a multi-genre author.
Yes.
So, you weave through, through things simultaneously. So, Alice, which one you think you're more comfortable writing or more appealing to you? Which one? And why?
You're making me choose. So, fantasy is my first and foremost love for writing. I love building beautiful worlds and filling them with beautiful things and taking people on magical adventures. But then historical fiction is a very close second favorite for me because I love, jumping back in time and exploring a very specific time period in a very specific place and really breaking down the culture and how those people lived and all that. Like, I love all the nuance of that. Because I'm also a giant history dork. So there's that. So yeah, I would say those are like my very close to favorites for the genres that I write.
Okay. Now, do you really fall in love with a genre just because it's what's selling right now, Sarah? Or it's because that's what you love writing?
I do not write to sell. As someone who's got a lot of life happening outside of my laptop, I make it a priority that I love what I'm writing. I expect that, while my stuff does get bought, I have some self-published items and I have my novel that came out last year. I find that if I don't love it, I end up hating the process. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's not about writing to sell. Although I will say this, dystopian fiction is up and coming. It's getting popular, which is beneficial to me. But ultimately, I figured my book probably wouldn't be extremely well read for a few years yet, simply because dystopian fantasies just wasn't big up until now.
And why do you think so, Alice? dystopian fantasy is getting, so much attention at the moment? Is it because of the world that we're living now, or?
Absolutely. It's people are responding to the current events that are happening in the
Okay.
world. And it's basically people do one of two things. They either go completely in the opposite direction to escape it, or they go head on into it and mire themselves into it. And that's why dystopian fantasy is becoming so popular, is the people who, go full force, mire themselves into it, that it's that kind of human desire to figure out, why is this happening, even though there is no rational explanation for it. Why is all this craziness happening in the world? But we still have that behavior where we seek those answers that we know we can't get, and we do that through whatever artistic medium we enjoy, and books are a very common way to do that.
Okay. So do you think that dystopian fantasy is taking over romance as the number one genre out there?
No, I feel like, well, that's the thing, is that romance is such a separate market. It's never going away. It's, it's this standby that will always be there, because there are people where literally that's the only thing they read. And that's the only thing they will ever read, that they have no desire to pick up any other sort of book. It's like its own separate entity, separate from the rest of the writing world. Whereas with the rest of the writing world, different genres, they all circulate. It's kind of like spin the wheel, what's going to be popular today sort of thing. So that all rotates. But, romance is something that it's its own animal. It's not going anywhere. It's a staple, tried and true sort of thing.
But this is something that you were never interested in writing anyway, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. I leave it to the people who are good at it and who enjoy it. Having not read a whole lot of romance myself, but having read fiction with romantic parts and stuff, I don't feel like it's something that I would enjoy writing. I do enjoy reading it when it's well written. I will say that. But it's probably not something I'll explore for a long time yet, because I really enjoy living in a harder, like a harsher area, which is why dystopian is good for me. I can really make the world super terrible and have these really great people come through it. And for me, the overcoming of the struggle is awesome. While I have read that in some romantic novels, I've read a little bit of Nora Roberts and stuff, but it's not like where I want to be all the time, I guess.
And since we really are getting close to our conversation, you know what? I wish that we could have more time to do this. It's getting so
Special
interesting.
edition.
I think so.
Edition 1 hour.
I think so. No, let's go back to the current project. I have to say also, by the way, that Alice and I worked on the project. Okay, and I'm very
Super
proud to say
fabulous.
she's one of my editors. Okay, and of my upcoming novel. It's a little, Okay.
It's fabulous. Read it.
But okay, so I'm working on something that I can tell readers to expect something sometimes in the middle of June, for example. Not July, I'm sorry. Middle of the summer. Yeah. This me. And you, Sarah, you said probably the end of next year, right?
I'm hoping.
Okay. So, and you, Alice, we know that it's going to be sometime, the beginning of next year? Or?
Honestly, right now, I don't have any hard timelines for anything. As I always tell people, the best thing is to just follow my social media, and I post updates about, this is where this book's at, this is where this book's at, and I announce things that way so people can kind of follow along on the journey with me.
Final question, Sarah, is what lesson would you give to anyone out there who wants to embark upon this journey writing dystopian fantasy?
I think one of the best things you can do when you're writing dystopian fantasy is probably to, I'm trying to think, because I've got 30 things floating around in my brain. I'm like, no, this is more important. No. Okay, biggest thing is, in dystopian fantasy, the world is terrible, so your character has to be great. They don't have to be good, but they have to be interesting enough to follow through whatever this horrible world is, whatever horrible things they're having to do. So definitely focus on character, because there's 1,000 different dystopian fantasies that take place in like a Fallout style world where nukes have gone off and stuff like that. So it's important that what you bring to the table is someone new to go through it, I think.
Right. And then our last question for you now. Any advice you could give to anyone who wants to be multitask, multi-genre, like you? Does that person discipline himself or herself to be successful?
Absolutely. So basically, your friend is time management. I am the queen of time management. I have tools that I can schedule out all of my posts on social media a month out in advance so that I can get all of that off my plate. And it's all just running in the background with all my algorithms and all my calculations and stuff. And then on top of that, having all of my stories calculated out where I'm like, okay, this book needs to be about this many chapters long, outline it out, write this, write that. And then it's like, oh, it's Tuesday. Got to switch, work on this project. Do. You just have to schedule everything out, time management, just, all of that. Your to-do list is your best friend.
And that wonderful note, I'm just going to say, it's been more than a pleasure. Just like you said, Sara, we're probably going to have a second edition of this one, right? Probably sometimes December, we'll do that. And I have to say again, that was Alice Liddell, also known as Lauren Master's son, prolific writer, good friend, and Sara Bushway, impeccable author, in the conversation this afternoon.